Hi, I'm Namita Ramani, founder of Above Digital, and you're listening to Successful Marketing for Small Business Podcast. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our very first guest, Nea Ferrier. Nea is founder of Ashtanga Yoga Dubai and owner of Nilaya House. She got into yoga after a 10-year of corporate role as a PR account director for a corporate company. And now she's a devoted student of yoga philosophy and a committed teacher of Mysore style. Nea, thank you so much for accepting my invitation to come on this podcast and sharing your journey and story.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about Nea, the small Nea, the growing up Nea. How did the corporate job start, and a little bit background about you?
Sure. Well, I was born in Sydney in Australia, so that's where I'm from originally, even though I've lived away from Australia for about 15 years now. And probably my biggest childhood memory was a lot of ballet. That's what I saw. Apparently, I came home from school after seeing somebody do a flamenco dance at school and told my mother I wanted to start flamenco. And she said, well, I don't know if there's any flamenco classes, but how about ballet? Okay. So I started ballet when I was 14 and when I was 4 and ended up dancing until I was 17. So
you got really serious into ballet.
I did, and there was a period of time when I was probably in my mid-teens when my ballet teacher said maybe she could go on to be professional, but that didn't happen because I became interested in lots of other things.
Like?
Maybe boys. No, but also I actually loved school, and I was quite academic at school, and so I think to focus on something like ballet, that needs to be the only thing that you do. Yeah. Where I felt like there were lots of other things that I wanted.
I'm glad you didn't pursue ballet only, because then otherwise you wouldn't be here and teaching us yoga. So yeah.
So I went on to university and I studied communications and with a major in public relations, and that was the plan, was to do that degree, get a job in a PR company, which I did. And I worked in a PR company for a few years in Sydney, and then I masterminded my transfer to Asia. I had come up with the idea that I wanted to go and live in Shanghai. I was very interested in Shanghai. In fact, I was a Sinophile. I was obsessed with China. I'd spent a lot of time down in Chinatown in Sydney. I started learning Mandarin.
Wow. Chinese. So you can speak Mandarin?
No, only a little bit. And then I asked my company, could I get a transfer to Shanghai? And they said, well, actually, we don't have anything in Shanghai now, but how about Hong Kong? I'd never been to Hong Kong, but I said yes. I actually couldn't wait to leave Australia. I felt my life started when I arrived in Hong Kong at the age of 25.
Wow. That's a pretty good, quick transition to, okay. And then you were in Hong Kong for how many years then?
So I was in Hong Kong for 3 years, and I enjoyed it very much. I was working in the PR company there. And it was in that time, though, that I started practicing yoga more seriously.
But there's a story behind that, how that happened, right? Would you be able to share how the transition happened from... I remember when we met before, you shared about how you got into partying and enjoying the Hong Kong Lang Kwai Fong Street and stuff, and how then...
Yeah, I mean, I was leading a pretty... typical Hong Kong expat lifestyle, which is very much work hard, party hard.
Yeah. I've been to Hong Kong a couple of times, and I really enjoyed the Lang Kwai Fong Street.
Yeah, no, it's fun. And for a while, I was really enjoying it as well. And things were going very well. I had a great job. I was traveling. But there was a feeling I had inside that was growing, this feeling of, is this all there is? And I could see the path that could be laid out in front of me, which is to just keep working in the company, rising up through the ranks, get married, settle down. And inside of me, there was a feeling like, is this all there is? Anyway, things got kind of thrown up in the air when I had a big breakup with somebody that I thought that life was going to be just laid out like that. And that made me question a lot of things about myself, about my future direction. And I looked at my lifestyle, actually, and I realized that the the working hard and throughout the week, and then playing hard. It was like this wheel that I was caught in. I mean, I guess now that I've studied yoga philosophy, you'd say this is the cycle of life, the samsara, and it's called a samsara, meaning a cycle of suffering that you follow a yoga path to actually break out of. I didn't know that at the time, but it was the tipping point to decide to have a drastic change of my lifestyle, which firstly was to take 1 month off without drinking alcohol, which seemed at the time like this huge thing to do, because I actually couldn't remember a weekend in the last 5 years that I hadn't been out to parties, and it had become very much just part of my life and what I did. And I think for a lot of people as well, it was not something people were actively questioned. And I realized that if I was going to make big changes, that was kind of the starting point. And so what happened from that is I suddenly had a lot of extra time, because to stop drinking alcohol actually meant I had to stop going out. I had to stop socializing, because at that period of time, it was really impossible for me to go out into a social situation and not accept a glass of wine. So I had to isolate myself, which is kind of lonely actually. But there was a feeling within me like I was on the verge of something. I was going into new territory, and so I had extra time. I was waking up without a hangover, so I was able to start going to yoga every day, and that's when I started practicing Ashtanga yoga. Up until then, I had been doing some yoga, but it was like just a hobby. It wasn't a life. It wasn't a way of life. It was just, one day would be the gym, one day would be a yoga class. It hadn't become part of who I was.
You tried different kinds of yoga, and how did you land to Ashtanga yoga as to be the path to choose for the...
Well, funny enough, the way I chose which yoga place to go to at that time was to choose the cheapest. So there was a place down the road. It was a big, like a yoga gym. They offered like 200 classes a day. They had a very cheap membership. I signed up so I could go as often as possible, because during that month, I think I was going morning and evenings. Like I was really...
all into it.
Getting into it. I mean, it was the Ashtanga that was my favorite class. So I was going to that studio, and then I found another smaller studio that focused on Ashtanga, and I would also go there as well. And then that studio closed down, and I said to the teacher, well, what are you going to do now? And I was really upset and shocked, and she was like, I guess, very yogic in her approach, and just said, well, I'm just going to go back to India. And I was like, what? Where are you going in India? And she said, I'm going to Mysore. And I said, where's Mysore? And she said, oh, well, that's where Ashtanga yoga comes from. And at that moment, even though I'd only been practicing probably for a couple of months at that stage, I thought, well, I'm going to go to Mysore. That's where I'm going to go. And so before I got there, I decided I thought, let's just test out this India thing. Because I'd done a lot of travel in Asia I'd traveled all throughout Southeast Asia by that point. But India, in my mind, I'd been interested in it, but I felt a bit nervous about going to India, particularly. And at that stage, it would be alone. And so I signed up to go on a trip, like a guided tour to Rajasthan. And I had 2 weeks in Rajasthan, and we were coming to the end of that trip, and everyone was feeling, oh, we're sad, we're leaving India. And I was like, I'm not sad, I know I'm coming back. And so I came back, planned to resign my job, and then organised so that was December, and by March I'd left Hong Kong to go to India for 6 months.
That's it. Suddenly you just decided I'm going to resign and head to India.
I mean, was it
scary or?
No, it wasn't scary. It was, but to put it into context, I was a young woman, unattached, with savings and no dependents. So it was the perfect time of life to take a step like that. There was no risk involved, I'm very lucky that I've always had a wonderful relationship with my family. So I always knew that what's the worst that can happen? I end up going and sleeping on my parents' floor, which I have done many times now since that. But suddenly when looking at it in that, I was like, resign. And I knew that I was educated, that I'd reached a certain level in my career, that I could take a break and doors would still be open for me. So I knew I would always be able to find a job with it again.
considering that you have a nice, because in PR you're all well connected, you have a strong social circle, and everybody knows you. And
well, it wasn't so much that. It's just the particular type of PR I specialised in was technology PR then, and in that period of the year, of the sort of mid 2000s, that was the really hot type of PR to be in, because it was when all the tech companies were making front page news. So when you sort of specialise, you've got a particular expertise that it's easier to. So in fact, I went after that 6 months in India. I went back to Australia. I shipped all my things back to Australia from Hong Kong. And the plan was to just get a job back in another PR agency. And I went and had a number of interviews and was offered jobs on the spot because I had this good experience.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't say yes to any of them. And I was saying, maybe just for a couple of months, or maybe contract work. And I realized I just wasn't.
So what happened in Mysore?
Well, I just really fell in love with the practice of yoga, and I was reading and practicing, and I had 3 months in Mysore, and I spent some other time visiting some other ashrams around India as well. Yeah. And I had a very deep calling within that I didn't know where this was going to lead me. I certainly wasn't thinking that I wanted to teach yoga at that point. That was very far off. I just knew at this point in my life I need to spend time deepening this. Yeah. And so I went back to Sydney, said no to these jobs. Also, I'd fallen in love with somebody that I'd met in Mysore, so that may have helped as well. So, I actually started a relationship with a lovely man from Japan. Mm-hmm. And so I went back to India, and we spent the next 6 months travelling and practicing and studying in Mysore as well. And that then led to a period of years where I would say, I call them my kind of in-between transient years, where I was doing some contract work in PR as a way to keep getting an income, and spending time in India, spending time in Thailand, all linked though by the desire to go to different meditation retreats, spend time in ashrams, spend time in practicing yoga. And around that time, I think it was near the end of 2008, I went with Nori to Japan, and he was a well-known Ashtanga yoga teacher in Japan, and I started teaching with him, doing some assisting, which I think is my advice to actually people who are looking to move into yoga teaching, having a mentor and somebody who can guide you and you can assist them in their classes is a really wonderful way
to start teaching.
And that lit a little bit a spark. I felt like, okay, this was giving me a different feeling to the satisfaction. I enjoyed my career in PR. It was very exciting, but the teaching felt rewarding in a different way. Yeah.
And then what happened after Japan then?
Right, okay.
We continue. Yeah.
So interestingly, Nori and I were in Japan, and then we went back to Singapore. We were in and out of Asia a lot, and Nori actually, we both of us were very into Buddhism at that time, and so we were sitting for Vipassana retreats. And
so you've done more than one Vipassana retreat?
Yes, I've done 3, yeah. The last one was quite a long time ago, but maybe I'll do another one again soon.
So you guys were doing these retreats?
Yeah, we were becoming very interested in the Buddhist path. Nori probably more so than me. He was sort of, I guess we'd say, further down his spiritual journey, and the relationship was interesting. I think sometimes you have relationships with people that are romantic, but also they operate on a different level as well. And I think with Nori, he was certainly my mentor when it came to teaching yoga, but he was also my mentor in spiritual development as well. So he decided he wanted to go and find a meditation teacher in Thailand, particularly interested in the Theravada Buddhism. And he was interested in finding like a forest monk who'd spend a lot of time meditating in the forest that could really instruct him in deep meditation practices.
So he got really deep into meditation.
Yeah. So, which I was also interested, but not quite as far down the path as he was. And that led him to the point to decide that he actually wanted to ordain, which is what he did. So he ordained as a Buddhist monk, which was a monumental thing to happen for me, because we loved each other very much. But I also really supported what he was doing because I believed in what he was doing. I really strongly believe that somebody's spiritual evolution is the most important thing to them, and sometimes you
have to let them go.
Yeah, sometimes you have to let them go. Yeah. So
as much as it hurts, you have to let them go.
Yeah, it did hurt. It hurt particularly talking to people who didn't understand that concept and having to explain that, no, I was actually okay with it. Didn't make it easy, but it wasn't a case of him choosing to be a monk over choosing me. You know what I mean? It wasn't like that. So he did that, and I had, by that stage, I was fallen in love with Nori, but I'd also fallen in love with Japan. So I decided that I would stay on in Japan, and that's actually at that point was really the tipping point from when I went from saying, oh, well, I work in PR and I'm doing a little bit of yoga teaching, to actually teaching yoga full time. So I spent some time in Osaka, in Tokyo, and eventually moved to a city called Nagoya, which is the third biggest city in Japan. And it's the home of Toyota. That's what it's famous for. And I started teaching Ashtanga yoga there, and teaching it in the style that you mentioned before, that's called Mysore style, which is purely referring to the city that Ashtanga comes from, and started teaching the first Mysore style program, which is where students come and the teacher teaches them individually, and they move through the yoga practice like a self-practice. So that was an interesting time, because it was the first program. Some people had been doing Ashtanga before, but certainly in Japan. In the big cities it was very popular, but it was the first time coming to that city. And so at the beginning I was very lucky. I had a studio owner who also practiced Ashtanga, and he was very supportive of starting this program, because at the beginning you're waiting in a room, you've put the posters out. And so this was 2008 or beginning of 2009. So this was, I mean, I wasn't on Facebook then. I wasn't, we weren't using things like that. I didn't even know how we advertised for it. Probably
just by putting flyers and stuff.
And each morning I'd just be waiting. There'd be
the
like
students to show up.
2 students, 1 student, 3 students, 1 student. And it went on like that for maybe a year until I built up.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Until you built up a following, like people who had
15 students, and that was exciting to get to 15 students.
Wow.
But that taught me a lot.
Patience,
perseverance, non-attachment to the result. Actually, everything that you learn in your yoga practice, your personal yoga practice, is then translated then into your teaching as well. And it was. I was enjoying being in Japan, but it wasn't an easy life. I wasn't earning very much money. I would get up and do my own practice at 3 in the morning, and then I would cycle 30 minutes to get to the studio to be there for 6 o'clock.
Okay.
So, and that was sort of day in, day out.
Wow, that's like dedicated effort to kind of go through that for the whole year and have 15 students. And the full house was 15 students. So you're doing all this. I think more it was for you than for like your own self.
Teaching is like that. It's very rewarding for yourself, but you do it because you really believe in the method that you're teaching. But the two things have to go together. So you're doing your own personal practice, which then gives you the energy and the fuel and the passion to then teach and share with others. But that was a period of time where I guess I was nursing a broken heart as well.
Yeah, you needed that break to kind of heal.
I think I did, although it was a period that I emerged out of realizing that Nori had become the monk, that I didn't need to become a nun. Because I was living a very austere, ascetic lifestyle. And what that transpired in is, after sort of 2 years of living in Japan, I didn't really have any friends. Japan already is a very isolating place to be. Not many people spoke English in Nagoya. I was learning Japanese, and I could have little conversations with students. But, I was in my early 30s, and I turned around at 33 and thought, is this what I want for my life.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I realized I needed to leave Japan.
Yeah. Wow. I can already feel what must be going on in the heart at that time. And
Yeah, it was tricky because I was like, but you've wanted this. You finally build up a program. You finally have students.
Yeah.
You can finally speak a little bit of Japanese, and now you wanted to walk away from it.
Yeah.
But I find once that idea comes, then I know that's the decision made, and then it's just a matter of doing it.
Yeah.
And so the decision was, okay, after 8 years in Asia, I felt a very strong calling to be back in Australia and sort of with my tribe, in a sense, with my family and friends.
Yeah.
So I went back and got a lovely job actually right in Bondi Beach, the famous Bondi Beach.
I heard about that.
Yeah, and I was essentially working for a studio that was connected to my teacher in Mysore. So it was a really lovely place to be working, and that things were going along perfectly until I fell in love again. And this time with somebody who wanted to travel the world again.
Isn't that cool?
Well, I don't know. I was 35 and feeling like, okay, I was just getting ready to be settled.
Yeah.
But then we started talking about exciting places, like places I hadn't been to yet, like Myanmar, and doing the Trans-Siberian and Eastern Europe and Turkey. And what I realized is I could also visit Japan again on that trip and go and do some teaching.
Yeah.
And then I had an opportunity to go to Beijing and do some teaching. And then I had some opportunity to go to Moscow and do some teaching. Yeah. So I put together sort of this year trip of visiting places that I'd always wanted to visit and do some teaching along the way.
Interesting.
And that's what brought me to Dubai.
Oh, okay. And then how did the Nilaya House come about?
Oh, well, that's quite a few years after.
Oh, okay. So Dubai was one of the destinations in that whole year-round trip.
That was the end point, and it was actually the person I was traveling with at the time. It was his idea to come to Dubai. It wasn't mine. But I researched and looked into it, and this was 2012. So yoga studios were just starting to open up
in Dubai. Yeah.
And so I started working at a place that I think was probably one of the first ones to open in JLT, actually. So I was very lucky to be sponsored and brought over here and set up, and I'll always be very grateful to the owners of that studio. And they took a big risk in, as I now know what it's like to open something. And so I came and I started working there, and then after a year I decided to start my own program, and that's when I started Ashtanga Yoga Dubai.
Okay.
And that was in 2013.
So a year after that, yeah. And then Ashtanga Yoga Dubai you were just freelancing, you didn't have a studio yet.
Yeah, so how I would do
your practice, now your teaching.
Ashtanga Yoga Dubai is the Mysore group of students, and what I realized for that is, I didn't need a studio 24 hours. I just needed space for a certain period of the day, because the Ashtanga practice is normally done in the mornings. We can do it in the evenings as well, but traditionally we do it in the mornings, and I thought I just need it for space from 6 till 9 o'clock. And I was lucky to be able to find space within a dance studio. So it started there, and then things grew, and then it evolved to...
So how did people find you at that time?
Again, I think it was still posters. I'm thinking back then. Then I think, and then a website.
But then Facebook was in, 2007 was when Facebook...
but I was probably a late adopter.
So it was word of mouth mostly then?
My business has always been, it's always been word of mouth. I think... some website was good as well, because I was listed on the international directory of Ashtanga Yoga teachers. I guess part of this story that I didn't put in was that I kept on going back to Mysore, and in 2010 received the official blessing from the guru in Mysore to give me the authorization to teach. There's certain levels of authorization, and there's level 1, level 2, and certification. This is in the Ashtanga system. So there's about 40 certified Ashtanga teachers in the world. And then there's about 450 at last count, it might be more now, of level 2 authorized teachers, and which is what I am. And actually, when I first moved to Dubai, I was the only authorized teacher in the Middle East. But I'm happy to say now there's more authorized teachers now teaching this method. So the space was firstly in the dance studio.
Yeah.
And then that grew to being in a hotel. And I was actually very content with that setup. The marketing, though, was still very much word of mouth. And it was just me. I was just, having to get an income from myself and pay the rent. Yeah. So I was still very much wearing the yoga teacher cap. And that setup was going along absolutely fine until I had an incident with where the hotel I was at. There was some problem with the room that I was in. And I suddenly realized that it seemed like a good business model in the fact that I could keep my costs low and manageable. I didn't have to worry about paying DIWA or, all the costs were contained. But actually, I didn't actually have control over it because it actually wasn't my place. Yeah. And I was always in somebody else's space, which I was actually fine with for those, it was almost 4 years of running business like that. And I would have a little altar, in Ashtanga yoga, we have a little altar at the front where we set up some photos and some candles, and that's what makes the focus of the room for doing the yoga. Yeah. And I would literally set that up and put it down each day. And I wasn't even questioning, should I stay like this? Or it was like, this is just what I'm doing. Yeah. And then it was only because there was this difficulty at the venue that the seed just planted, maybe it's time to get my own place. Yeah. And also by this stage, I had something in the marina end of Dubai. And then I had people in Sharjah and Jumeirah who were saying, that's too far for us to drive. So then I had, by this stage, had an assistant teacher. So I got her to go down to the other end of Dubai. Yeah. So once I calculated how much rent I was spending in the two places and looking at the amount of students coming from the two places, I realized, okay, maybe it's time. And the funny thing is when I very first came to Dubai and I'd gone to see Al Sakal Avenue, which is the arts, area of Dubai. And I liked that area, it had a bit of grit.
There's a funkiness to it.
Exactly, and it was different, and you had these warehouse-style spaces. Yeah. I remember I did say at that time, oh, it'd be so great to have a yoga studio here. And I must have said it, and my old flatmate, she just mentioned this to me the other day. She was like, but you remember, you did actually say that you would love to have a place here. And I think it was one of those things that you say and then just shelved. I didn't even think, that wasn't the time. And it wasn't. I would have been crazy to open something there 5 years ago before I had a student base. Yeah. So that would have been really putting the cart before the horse. It could have worked if I had lots of money. To pay the rent of the warehouse and sit and wait for students to come. But I'm not in that position. So having it evolve in a very organic way of just the students growing and then being able to basically just move in a sense and set up this the space. And so that's how Nilaya House came about. So it was essentially a space for Ashtanga Yoga Dubai to move into, so for my personal teaching. But then I realized as I started looking at warehouse spaces and then found the one that I thought would work for us, that this was going to be a bigger thing than just Ashtanga Yoga Dubai. And so now it's evolved into a yoga school that offers Ashtanga Yoga, Iyengar Yoga, Hatha Yoga, Yin Yoga, about to start Kundalini Yoga, Jiva Mukti Yoga. Wow. And now it's much bigger than I ever imagined. And it's almost like it just happened. Yeah. But of course it didn't just happen.
I know. And that's what I want to know actually. Yeah. How did you make it happen? Because considering the cost of setting up a business, going for the trade license, renting the warehouse, I'm sure it's not small money. It must be good money. I don't know if you had enough students to cover up all the cost, and it was not break-evens from the start. I'm sure there was an investment.
Obviously, there was an initial amount of money that needed to be raised, and I was able to do that through private supporters, and that was to cover the fit out because it was an empty shell. It's it's still largely an industrial area where I am, but the warehouses can be now used for commercial purposes. But next to me is a catering company. Across the road is an ice cream factory. So they're all more in production rather than, a yoga school. But I just needed a space. That's what I was looking for, was a large space. And I knew I didn't want to be in an office building. I thought if I'm going to do it, it has to be something a bit different. So I needed money for the build, which was to put in the bathrooms. Actually, the most expensive thing was putting in the air conditioning. That was really important because that had to be done in a very specific way because it needed to keep the place cool but not blow on people. And partly also the Ashtanga method, we keep the room a little bit warm. It's not hot yoga, but the warmth comes from the room being room temperature
being maintained.
So the air conditioning specification, that took quite a bit of effort. I was really lucky to work with a fantastic contractor called Pinnacle, who I highly recommend. And then the wooden floor was the second biggest expense because I knew that had to be a really good quality. So I ended up importing something from Germany. So I raised money to cover that.
So you have angel investors who invested in the business.
Not investors.
How would you raise money without
A loan.
Okay. You borrowed money from relatives and friends.
Personal loans that I'll be paying back. But I thought about the idea of investors. But to be honest, I wasn't actually that convinced of the viability of a yoga school being a good business investment. It's my dream and it's what I want to do, and I'm able to make an income and a living from it. But in terms of pitching it out to potential investors as, hey, invest your money and this is your returns you're going to get. I certainly didn't.
So how did you convince these?
I didn't convince them. It just, to be honest, the money came
by itself.
That came very easily. That's when I knew I was on the right path.
I believe that when things flow, they're meant to happen.
Yeah, that was the easy part. And actually, ideas and sometimes the initial part of starting a business is the easy part. It's the doing it and the maintaining it. That requires the energy.
The execution of it.
It's the execution, for sure. I mean, people have ideas all the time. People start new businesses all the time. But it's seeing it through. But I'm still young. I'm still a new business in a sense. But so let's see where things go. But
so the capital was raised. You got the warehouse. You got the fit outs.
I knew that I had to find this warehouse within that summer. So it was 2 summers ago. And I was just like a crazy woman, just like calling real estate agents on Dubizzle. It was 45-degree heat, driving and looking at different warehouses. And I just kept saying to my husband, I've got to keep the pedal on the metal because I have to get this done now because I know how long it's going to take. And my other venue was coming to the end, and I knew I wanted that shift to be seamless. So it was just looking at place, and I was feeling a bit despondent, almost like I wasn't going to be able to find it. And then actually a real estate agent recontacted me and said, that place you didn't come and see, why don't you come and see it? And then that ended up being the right place. And then the fit out started, which was terrifying. By that stage, it was like the cart had bolted, the horse had bolted. It was out of the stables. There was nothing I could do.
You have to let it go. You have to keep it running.
And it was interestingly in that little area of warehouses, there were a few other young entrepreneurs, and I remember talking with this guy down the road, and he's like, once it gets to this stage, you just have to keep putting one step in front of the other. And my husband each day would be saying, let's go and look at the build, let's go and look at the fit out. And I would actually feel sick going and looking at it because that's when I realized that it was actually happening.
Were you anytime intimidated? Oh my God, I've spent all this money and this has happened and we don't have enough.
The thing I was most nervous about was the difficult part was having the vision, because when you see an empty space in the middle of our cours and you're trying to imagine, are people going to come here?
Yeah.
Because I was moving from a very highly residential area to a non-residential industrial area. So no one lives there. So you have to ask people to drive there. And you're just looking at this empty warehouse and you can't see. Now people come in and they see how it looks beautiful, and so you think, oh yeah, it's understandable. But when you're looking at an empty space and you don't even know what colors you're painting the walls and how it's going to come out, and I would drive the route for Marina. I would drive it from downtown.
All the directions.
I would drive it from all the directions, all times of the day, checking traffic. Even though I'd already signed the lease, so
you can't do anything.
I was going to do. Looking at the parking at all different times of day, and
you know what you were doing, by the way? You're thinking on how to make your future students, because not clients, they're students, comfortable in reaching you in the most easy, optimistic way, and accordingly set up your classes and stuff so that...
and I thought I need to know all of this information.
That's called groundwork, hard work. That is the most hard work.
And the interesting thing is when you have this excitement for the project, the energy for that groundwork just comes. Like, you know, the estate agent would call at like 3 p.m. in the afternoon and say, do you want to come and see the warehouse? And it'd be 45 degrees. And I'd say, sure. Where normally if somebody, you know, you're like, no, I think I'll stay inside. But there was such...
There's a fire inside, kind of.
The fire was inside for sure. And that's when you start realizing that maybe something is coming through you. And you just have to...
Nowhere did you ever feel the fear of failing or falling or not making it happen or work?
Yeah, I did have that fear. I did.
And perhaps because you're into yoga and you're pretty centered because of the meditation and on the practice. But generally others who are not into dedicated practice of meditation and yoga probably feel much more.
I don't know what other people feel, but I can definitely say that my yoga practice was what supported me. And I would sit for meditation and I would ask for guidance. And the thing with the purpose for a yoga practice is it gives you clarity and it gives you insights that you otherwise would not be able to see. And when you ask for questions, you can get the answers because your mind has become cleared and you've become open to receiving those answers.
So intuition is generally higher when you are actually practicing on a regular basis, I guess. But otherwise also, I mean, I believe that entrepreneurs have some special gut. And you can feel and sense if you're on the right path, if it's not right. And you feel.
Many of my decisions are based on just how I feel like I can't explain it to somebody, but I feel this is right, which is also why I didn't want investors. Because I really didn't want to have to answer to somebody because I was like, and it's not just because I'm an authoritarian, but just...
Because you want the freedom to make decisions yourself, otherwise you're answerable, right?
Yeah, as soon as the investors are involved, I maybe have people saying, well, why don't you do this and why don't you do that? And I always actually take a very big picture view of things. So I will have classes on in the school that an investor might turn around and say, well, why is that class running? No one's coming to it and it's not profitable and da-da-da. Well, I'm like, I don't care. It's there because I believe in it. It's needed. It's important. And it's all interconnected. It's all coming together as to what I'm trying to do. So always the objective for Nilaya House was, yes, I would like it to be profitable. I'm still currently repaying those loans. So that's coming along.
How many years has it been? Nilaya House is now open?
Now 18 months.
Okay.
Yeah. And we fortunately have been able to cover our costs, which in this market, I feel very grateful for.
Absolutely.
So The making money part, of course, is the secondary. The primary objective of what I always keep at the center of my mind is to create a space that is for people to feel comfortable to start practicing yoga, but also for people to go deeper into their yoga practice. So, which means sometimes adding on workshops and classes, which might be a little bit on the fringe and people don't know so much about it, but that's part of it. That's part of the exploration, not always going with what I know will just fill up the classes, but doing things that people won't find elsewhere.
Yeah. And then how did you hire the help? Like, you can't be teaching all the classes all the time.
Well, yeah, I pretty much was at the beginning. No, I was very lucky when I first started that already I had my other teacher, Alexi. So he would do the evenings and I would do the mornings. And yes, I was very lucky that I already had existing students. So I don't know how I would have opened if
it was just you.
And right at the beginning. But I still didn't know if everyone was going to move, because for some people they lived in Marina and I was asking them now, to do a bit of a drive. And most people moved. Some people didn't. Some people didn't have cars. That was the other thing. I'm not close to public transport, so that felt a bit risky. But I did some research and I sent out a survey actually before really making the decision. And I found out that actually my students come from all over Dubai. So that meant they're coming for something specific rather than it's just because that's the closest yoga studio.
They want to come for the practice, for this particular kind of practice. So they'll drive from anywhere.
In Dubai, that's what it's like. If you want to go somewhere, you get
make an effort to go.
You make an effort and go. If your product is good, then people
go.
People will come. So when I opened, I didn't have the internet. I didn't have a receptionist. I think I had towels. That was a big decision. Should I have towels? Because I'd put in these nice change rooms, and everyone was used to the 5-star facilities in the hotel, and it was a big debate between me and some of my people who were helping me, and some people were saying no, you don't need towels. People can just bring their own towels, and others were saying no, you've got to have towels. But my budget was so tight that even the thought of spending money on getting the towels was like, can I afford it? And then eventually I realized okay, I think I can afford towels. But the idea was to open in such a basic way that my overheads right from the start were as low as possible. I mean, people were saying to me, when you do your cash flow, when you do a business plan, you need to plan for 6 months of working capital, you need to plan for your salary for 6 months. And I was like, well, that's great, but I don't have that. I have to hit the ground running right from the start. So it also meant I didn't have a sign for out the front. So people were arriving getting all lost in our course, getting lost in the warehouse complex, coming in and saying, why didn't you have a sign? I was like, that's 3,000 dirhams for that sign. I'll wait until I've got that money in the bank, because I don't know how the next few months are going to go.
So you don't need everything in one go. Things can come slowly and gradually as things progress.
Well, I guess in my case, I don't know whether this is the advice I'm giving other people. I was lucky because I had the loyalty of long-term students who understood the journey that I was on, and also everyone was excited to be in the new space. And also it's called Nilaya House for a reason. It's a personal feel. Nilaya is like a derivative of a Sanskrit word meaning peaceful, like a peaceful home. Not just peaceful in a home, but like a refuge. And that's what I wanted it to be. You've got this busy city, you've got this gritty industrial area, and you get there and it feels like coming into a home. So everything in the yoga school is hand-picked by me, from the door handle of the hand that I found in Mumbai at Chor Bazaar, to the tiles on the wall in the bathroom was because I was driving out to Dragon Mart every second weekend, choosing the tiles. Every little thing, the doors on the handles on the bathroom doors, I would say to the contractor, what handles are we going to put on the bathroom doors? And they'd send me a photograph, because they were used to doing offices. They'd never done a yoga school before. And they'd send me photos of just like a corporate door handle. And I'd be like, no, that's not it. That has to be something. And I was very lucky. I was very, along the way, supported by wonderful suppliers. And actually, a lot of people talk about their nightmare stories of working with contractors and suppliers.
This is the most positive story I've heard so far.
My contractor, they were noticing things that I wasn't. I never ever had to crack the whip. If anything, they were calling me. They were amazing. And then I had other beautiful things of where I had a carpenter who was doing some woodwork for me, and he ended up creating this. We decided to use bamboo. A big part of building the Shala was to use sustainable and eco-friendly products. So he suggested bamboo because it's a natural, sustainable resource. It's also naturally water resistant. So that's what we decided to use for the bathroom cabinets. And taking on that bamboo theme, he then created this yoga mat storage case made completely from bamboo. It was like a work of art. Like, it was unbelievable. And I hadn't created it. Like, he had come up with this idea, and it was like his gift to the Shala. It was beautiful. So I don't know, sometimes doing things on a budget means you have to be more creative. The furniture in the chill out area, and that was a big part of the design, that I wanted space for the yoga, but also space for people to be able to just sit around and have a chat. That was the one thing I never got to have when we had it at the hotels. It was very much in and out, where I wanted to create a place that had a sense of a community. So the furniture there is made from pallets, and now one of my students has a pallet factory. So he delivered the pallets. My husband and I spent the weekend sanding the pallets, whitewashing them.
So it's like a lot of your own touch, like everything is made with a lot of love and heart. And I guess that's how every entrepreneur.
Yeah, and when you don't have the money, you have to do it that way.
Yeah.
But the beauty is then you get these things that are probably more creative than if I had have just, gone to IKEA. I was also felt ethically I wanted to try and get secondhand things. Why go and buy new things? So I was looking I got mirrors off Dubizzle, a storage cabinet, a rug. That took a lot of effort, actually. The Dubizzle thing, you've got to drive out everywhere.
True. So how do you attract these amazing partners who come and co-teach with you and partner with you here?
The teachers?
Yeah,
that's also interesting, as that happens a lot from intuition, that I feel like the right people get put in my path. So I tend to meet people and I will get a good feeling about them. I'm not always right, to be honest, but so far with all my teachers, I've been really blessed. But in saying that, it's not just a basis of good feeling. I mean, when somebody sends me an email of wanting to teach, I have a few questions that I send back in terms of how long they've been practicing yoga, how long they've been teaching yoga, and that actually is then the decider as to whether we take a step further. And so I had made it, one of the things I really wanted to do with Nilaya House is to make sure that the teachers have a lot of experience. So I have some new teachers, because I also want to mentor and grow new teachers as well. But certainly for our teachers that are certified within the Iyengar and the Ashtanga tradition, they have more than 10 years teaching experience, which in Dubai is almost a little bit of a rarity sometimes, to go to a class with a teacher that has
experience,
that much teaching experience, not just practice experience.
And what do you do to keep the teachers? What do you do to retain the teachers? Mostly everybody, I don't know how it works in your industry. Are people supposed to be full-time, or they're freelancers, or?
Yeah, teachers, most yoga teachers will work at a few different places as well as teaching privately. I believe in paying teachers fairly.
Is what makes them stay with.
I don't know whether it's what makes that, but I think right from the outset, I like to have a very direct and open discussion about the payment and come to terms that is satisfying for them. Yeah, because there's no point in somebody agreeing to something with down the track that they realise the effort involved is just not worth it. And I also feel like there's an investment on behalf of both parties. So when you're starting a new class, I know from experience, because as I mentioned in Japan, where I was sitting there waiting for students, it can take time. And because I've been on that journey myself as a teacher, I know things take time, but that doesn't mean they're not going to happen. However, now I'm wearing the hat as of a business owner, so I have to balance, being able to invest and wait for things to take time with also having an income as well. So, yeah.
And what do you do to keep the students coming back? I think it's the practice that makes them come back.
Yeah, for that, I don't have too much control.
Yeah.
I've learned over the years, you can have students who are loving the yoga and coming and committed, and then they disappear and I don't see them. And then they might come back again.
But how do you sustain the business then if people come and go like that?
Well, Dubai is a transient place anyway, so always there'll be people leaving. And that used to be something it was really hard for me because you like your students and you're enjoying seeing the progress they're making and the change in their lives. But pretty much every summer before the summer here in Dubai, people will say, oh, by the way, we're moving to Zurich, or that's what people do here. They come for a few years and they leave. That's changing.
People stay back longer here now. It's like becoming home now.
Yes, and that was actually one of the reasons why I felt okay about starting a permanent yoga studio, because I feel like the demographic of Dubai is changing, where people are staying for longer. I have students in their 50s and 60s who, for them, Dubai is home at the moment. And the other thing is there's a lot more young working professionals here. Before the summer, I think things would completely clear out, and I probably wouldn't even bother running classes, but there's enough people still around who don't go away for the whole summer. They might be in and out over the summer period, but they still want to do classes while they're here. So people are always leaving, people are always coming. Yoga is still new in Dubai. I mean, we're not talking about a saturated market like the US or Australia, but even in saying that, yoga is going under. I mean, I was just in London and visiting a few yoga schools there, and that's a big city and it has a lot of yoga studios, and there's more coming, like another chain.
There's always room for more.
It's still growing.
And there's always enough business also, I feel, everywhere. People want more comfort, they want things around their area, so it's kind of... And these big cities are crowded, so there's a lot of people living as well, right?
I mean, I think it's only going to grow.
Yeah.
Because particularly in this market here, we have people who know what yoga is. You have people who don't know what yoga is. You have people that have heard about it but haven't tried it yet. Yeah. In Australia, I would say yoga classes are almost 50-50 when it comes to men and women. That's still not the case here, no way. There's still a lot of men who are yet to come and try yoga. Arab population as well, becoming more and more interested. Yeah. So I feel like there's still great potential.
So what's the future? What's the future of Nilaya House? Like how do you plan to grow it now? Or we're still 18 months old, so we still have a lot of
I'm still, actually, to be honest, I'm still building up the schedule. So I opened with a basic schedule with mainly Ashtanga yoga, and then I created a space downstairs to focus specifically on the Iyengar yoga method, which uses a lot of props. And just now this weekend over Eid, actually, we're closing the studio to do some renovations. So I'm actually expanding that room. So that's exciting because that meant it's gone from a couple of students to a few more students to realizing that room needs to be a little bit bigger. Yeah. But part of my the commitment for Nilaya House is that we do keep class sizes reasonably small. That's one of the things that I wanted to have students coming and feeling like they're getting a really nice level of interaction and guidance from a teacher, not just being like a number in the room, not that sort of gym style yoga where you just get packed in and the teacher doesn't really know your name or who you are or what your medical history is. So that's growing, and now after the summer we'll start adding on a few more different styles.
Okay. But what about, do you have any vision for like 5-year or a 10-year plan or a business plan?
You know what? I don't do plans.
You just let the flow.
Even for my own life.
Yeah.
What I do is I have, I guess, what I see as my mission, like my what I want to do.
Yeah.
So now it is, I want Nilaya House to be a place of learning, of learning of yoga.
Yeah.
Again, how that evolves, I'll see. But definitely one thing is that I want to grow the shop.
More shopping experience.
Yeah, not just because I'm thinking, let's sell some yoga leggings to the people coming in. Yeah. But actually, it's because of some things that I really believe in. I feel that, firstly, Dubai has great shopping malls, but quite lacking in little boutiques. Yeah. And I think it's starting to happen with the market scene here. You've seen in the last few years a lot of really great local brands from doing handmade jewellery, handmade soaps, handmade cosmetics. Yeah. I love markets and shopping at markets, and I love shopping at little boutiques where you can find locally made, organic, natural, eco-friendly, and I feel like that is a growing interest of people here, which is fantastic. And so I would like to have more space in Nilaya House for setting aside for those type of things. So I'm actually thinking of doing maybe a pop-up market soon that will have, like, just over the weekend, getting in some.
So you think the PR experience that you had comes in quite a bit handy?
I'm
sure it does.
It's a different PR world to when I was in PR. When I was in PR, I was writing press releases and sending them out by fax. Yeah. So the social media aspect, I still find reasonably challenging because I think a lot of people do because it's changing so quickly. I also find it can be a wonderful way of connecting people, but I can find it really contrived as well. I think a lot of the games that people have to play to get their posts seen, I find a bit like, coming from a yoga perspective, where we try and speak the truth, and then you see like Crab House Dubai, I shouldn't say that, but some business that has absolutely no connection to my business write a comment at the bottom, and that's not written by a person, it's written by that's what I've just been told recently. It's been written by a robot. So I find that part challenging, and I've been advised, okay, well, if you want to get more followers, you've got to go and like other people's things, and you've got to write comments. And I said, well, I'll only do that if I actually do like it, and I'll only write the comment if I actually mean the comment.
Organic growth.
Yes, so
Coming on that, you want to share with us a little bit about the other business that you have, which is Oni Earth Organics. Yes. How did that come about?
Well, that's been sort of running along in the background for the last couple of years, but now it's nice because I've got the chance to actually showcase those products in your Nilaya House. Yeah. So this is really just a passion. I love textiles from India, and I had seen a documentary a few years ago that I would say was life-changing, called The True Cost, and it was about the fast fashion industry, and that really opened my eyes to basically the cost of consuming. I used to be somebody who would go to like a Zara or an H&M and think, wow, how fantastic, this dress for only this much. Because also, being a yoga teacher, I'm really living on a budget. So those things would seem fantastic. And then I started understanding that they're that cheap because people aren't being paid properly for these things.
And there's a lot of cruelty as well.
Yeah, it's at somebody's cost. Yeah. The fact that I can wear something, that we can wear things in the West recently somebody launched a 1 pound bikini.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that work? It works because somebody is not being paid at the other end and they're working in, very unethical conditions. So that opened my eyes to the fast fashion. And then part of that documentary was looking at organic cotton. Yeah. And I suddenly realized, it was like a light bulb moment of, oh yeah, I mean, we're so interested in organic food, and you eat organic food for your own health, but you also eat it because you're protecting the earth from minimizing the pesticides that are going into the earth. Well, cotton is one of the biggest crops that we have, and the growth of conventional cotton uses an extreme amount of pesticides, and it goes into the soil, it goes into the waterways. Yeah. So I suddenly realized, okay, and part of the interest I had is because I spend a lot of time in India, and India is a huge producer of cotton. Yeah. And I started feeling like if I was truly like living my yoga in terms of having compassion for those around me, compassion for the earth, switching to organic food for my own health is one thing, but looking into wearing organic cotton as much as possible. And then the next stage was, okay, why not create a product that creates demand for organic cotton? Because if these farmers are making the switch and it's a big thing to switch to start growing organic cotton, you've got to let your soil lie fallow for I think 7 years before you can. So they need to be supported. They need to be supported by the Western world in demand for these products. So these ideas all came together when I was on a trip to Rajasthan and saw just the beautiful hand block printed fabrics that they do there. And my husband and I thought, okay, let's start doing bedding. And originally we had all these ideas, okay, we're going to do the pillows and the duvet covers and the quilts, and it became really overwhelming and really complicated. So we've just simplified it to just a quilt, which is actually what I use now in summertime under the air conditioning. It's just like a lightweight quilt, and it's the perfect consistency. But people in Europe use quilts as well, so they might use that like at the end of the bed over the duvet.
We use this a lot in India.
And you use it a lot in India.
Yeah, it's a common...
So we started just selling at markets, and that got really exhausting. And now I don't have so much time selling at markets. So now it becomes part of what? And that kind of, actually it was the only earth-kind fabrics that set the theme, I guess, for having the boutique. I mean, when I opened Nilaya House, I wasn't planning to have a boutique. But then I put my quilts in, and then I think, what else happened? Somebody had some other products. Oh, one of the students was making some organic skincare. She said, can I put those in? And now it's just evolved. And seeing the response from students that they actually really value having access to these type of things. People now sometimes come and do a little bit of gift shopping because they know they can get things there that you wouldn't be able to get
anywhere else.
So that's an area I'm interested in growing, but it's an area I probably know the least about, because I think retail has its own science in terms of managing stock and inventory.
It's a different kind of a business altogether.
Yeah, but I'm really lucky. I mean, I didn't mention this before, but I do have a business partner. She's she's actually my very close friend, and they say you shouldn't do business with friends, but actually it really works because we know each other very well. I trust her completely, and she understands me and understands.
Right from the beginning, you have a business partner.
Not right from the very beginning. Near towards the end, she actually came in at the end when I realized I need somebody to help with the financial side. Trying to do everything, you have to do everything by yourself at the beginning because sometimes you don't have that support. But I was lucky that she came in, so actually right around the time that Dubai brought in paying tax. So I need somebody to help manage the finances. But she's almost like, we will have discussions about things, but in terms of how the business runs,
that's all on your responsibility. If I ask you 3 things in your business you would do different, are there any 3 things that you would do differently now that you can see this whole thing ready in front of you?
Yeah, I think one thing I really learned along the way, probably leaving things in the hands of the PROs and things other people and there were some problems that I came up against with things not getting approved and I was kind of like chasing them and they were chasing somebody else. And actually things got moving a lot better when I just went and did it. So even though I said just then that you can't do everything, sometimes it is actually worth finding the information, especially like what you're mentioning, that groundwork stage, to do as much groundwork yourself personally. And I think maybe I was a little bit nervous about going in and meeting with the different government departments here. But then once I started doing it, I realized that actually
it's easier.
It's much easier. And because I was hearing got to hear the information firsthand, and I found people extremely helpful and supportive. And I had really, really nice experiences. I had this lovely woman I'll always remember in DED, and I was going in with all these questions. I was all confused because there's no manual, right?
Absolutely.
There's nothing saying you do this and then you
have to
do
go
this.
figure it out yourself.
Figuring it out. And she was like, hey, Bibi, why didn't you just come and talk to me right at the very beginning? And I was thinking, why didn't I?
Yeah.
So that would probably be one thing I would, if I do things again, just straight away go in and talk rather than, trying to get the information from people who are maybe the professionals, but hearing it first.
Making the effort yourself. I think we become, because you're wearing so many hats and trying to do everything, you want to just try to give something away. But I think it's a good idea, the setup, that you do yourself the groundwork of at least the government work.
Now I've got to think of 2 more other things that I do differently. Yeah. Maybe I'll have to report back in a year's time.
All right. So even that one thing is, looks like in your business, everything has come as a flow. It has just happened. The path is like the minute you're ready and the path is constructed. So that's how your business has so far. I shouldn't say that. Business. That's how Nilaya House has come about. The way the whole center and everything. It was meant for you and the path was carved as you started walking on it, I guess. This is what I understand from the...
Well, I'm probably leaving out like a bit of, the sleepless nights and...
You did have sleepless nights, apart from...
But over funny little things, like really what colour to paint the walls was really stressing me out.
That's a girl thing. We want everything very perfect and very, so...
And I think it is this wearing the many hats. And what I realised is that sometimes I was saying to myself, I think I need to hire an interior designer. I'm not a designer. I kept on saying. And then I just realized I can't afford to hire an interior designer. I can't afford to pay somebody to work out what colors to paint the walls. Yeah. Maybe I can do it. In fact, I know what I like. Yeah, let's do it. And then just releasing myself of this, limiting the words, and words are very powerful. Yeah. And which is another thing that I would say why having a yoga and meditation practice is so beneficial during this time of creating a business. Because when you practice yoga and sit for meditation, you become very acutely aware of what's happening in your subconscious. And so you can start noticing very quickly words or phrases that potentially could be limiting and prevent you from growing and developing further. You can quickly pick up on it and say, no, I'm going to drop that. Yeah. I'm not going to go down that route. I'm actually not going to listen to these seeds of doubts. Other people's words left a big impact as well. Yeah. Because I had a lot of support, but I had some people very close to me who said that I shouldn't do what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And that was actually very tough. That was stronger than I expected. Yeah. Those words reverberated in my mind.
And you get scared. When your own friends and family don't support you?
Yes.
You start doubting, am I doing the right thing?
But I would definitely say, because having that grounding in a daily meditation practice, you can nip these things in the bud quickly. Yeah. Otherwise, they can overwhelm you and then you get paralyzed. Yeah. But I do firmly believe that sometimes doing too much planning can be to your detriment. Plans need to be there, but they need to be like you need to have the overall idea of what you're doing.
Yeah.
The minutiae, the little stuff, that will sort itself out. You'll deal with it when you get to it.
Correct.
To start like writing sort of this list of all these little things, that's when you can get absolutely paralyzed. And I see that in talking to a lot of people just over the last 18 months, of friends who have talked about wanting to start something. Most of the time it goes, but what about this, what about this?
You get overwhelmed by the thought of all the things that you have to do.
Yes, and then that leads to inaction. So, just linking back to what I was mentioning before about many people have ideas, but it's actually getting them done. But I'm a star. My star sign is Taurian.
Okay.
So Taurians are known for being reasonably pragmatic and grounded, and I can be a bit of a bull. So I can get things done.
You're the executor. If you want to get something done, we should give it to Nea.
But I would say at the beginning I had to do a lot of things by myself, and it's been really nice now having the business grow to be able to involve other people to support me.
Yeah.
And that's also been a huge learning for me of how to manage things, but also how to let go. And that's a continual balancing act, definitely.
Yeah, true. Last question, 3 advice for other entrepreneurs and small business owners you wish you had been given. What would you like to advise other businesses who are listening to you now?
Yeah, probably those points that I said before, like do the groundwork as much as possible by yourself, rather than relying on others. Practice yoga and meditation. If possible, start yoga and meditation before you start your business.
Yeah.
And I think that's a message that what I try and give to my students, is that it's easy to do your yoga, or it's easy to sit for meditation when life is going smooth.
Yeah.
But each time you do your yoga practice, you get on the meditation cushion, that is an investment for when things are
not
difficult.
Going right. Yeah.
You're building a mental resilience that you're going to need to draw on at some point.
Yeah.
And whether that's through ups and downs and the vicissitudes of running your own business, or whether it's through emotional effort. So it's like, water the garden, plant the seeds and grow those plants and put the roots down and make them really strong, and then you've got that foundation.
People are usually, when they are in the worst time of their life or going through the toughest, that's when they go into yoga and meditation, I guess. So
and if you're going in there, that is a great time to start, and certainly that's when I started. But I was so grateful for, during the period of starting the business, that it was firmly established, because that morning period that I would have to myself on the mat, where I still, of course, thoughts are coming and going, and sometimes in that really busy period I'd have to just stop and go and write things down. But it gave me like a brief reprieve. But I could feel the difference. Like when you have got a regular yoga practice, there's this, it's a centeredness, it's like a groundedness that is there, that you can ride the storm a little easier. Certainly I know, in comparison to, obviously I'm a little bit older and wiser than when I first started yoga, but definitely starting my own business at this time in my life was the right time for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and your story.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to this conversation. I hope you got some insights and learning from Nea's story and journey, and some new things that you can apply to your business if you're going through a challenge or a situation. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast, because the more you rate and review from whatever channel you're watching, we can reach to more and more people. Please do share with podcasts with other businesses or other friends and people you think can benefit from this conversation. Thank you for listening, and see you next week.